Hi, and welcome to a quick review of an album that has been getting a lot of play in my headphones lately. This is going to be a quick review of the album Day for Night by the Tragically Hip. And like I mentioned, this one has been getting a lot of play in the last month or two, so it's something that's fresh on my mind. And, maybe a little bit of a kind of spoil it in the beginning here, but overall, I feel that Day for Night it's a no-skip album for me. There's a couple of softer tracks, but in general, it's going to be a no-skip album, and I think that it's one of the Hip's strongest. Carried in my mind by a mix of narrative masterpieces such as Nautical Disaster, Grace 2, Yawning or Snarling, as well as just kind of rockin' tunes, just bangers in my mind, like Fire in the Hole and An Inch an Hour. Because of that, really what I think is just an excellent artistic mix of narrative masterpieces. Again, that's maybe heavy praise to dump onto this album, but for me, in my listening experience, that's kind of where I feel that they land. But that mix of those narrative pieces and those just rockin' bangers carry the album and provide a mix and a blend of tracks that just continue to demand repeat listens for me. And ultimately, it's an album that lyrically commands my attention. So just on the more mechanical side of things, Day for Night comes in at just under an hour in length. Of course, I got the Wikipedia page pulled up here so we can get some of the basic facts. But at just under an hour in length, it's a pretty, it's a digestible listen. That's certainly longer than many albums coming out now, but to me, that's not out of the realm of something that I can hold an attention span to. Most of the tracks are hanging in that 3 to 5 minute range. Day for Night is the fourth full-length album released by the Tragically Hip, with the 3 full-length album predecessors being Up to Here, Road Apples, and Fully Completely. There was, of course, the 1987 self-titled EP, which is a great listen, but I really, in my opinion of the Tragically Hip, this 4-album run, Up to Here, Road Apples, Fully Completely, and Day for Night, is kind of the defining masterstroke of the Tragically Hip, creatively, sonically, artistically, and really when taken as a kind of quartet of albums, I think could be a full Tragically Hip experience and can stand on its own legs, and to me justifies a conversation around the Tragically Hip as a great band. So when I think about their career and their legacy, everything on top of those 4 albums to me is just kind of icing on the cake, and it's not the core must-have, because I think that these 4 albums are so strong that everything else is almost a non-starter. It's almost not even needed for the conversation. Some highlights off of the album for me, I mentioned some of those. I think that heavy praise of a narrative masterpiece, but some of those, like Grace 2, Yawning or Snarling, those have a slightly softer narrative structure that allows the listener to kind of impose a lot of their own ideas and a lot of their own imagination onto what that narrative might be about, but they're still very intentional and driving in that they're clearly about something. And that might sound a little silly to say that these tracks are excellent from a narrative standpoint, and then just to say, well, they're about something, whatever that might be. Yet, in the context of a 3 to 4 minute song, that idea that they're about something is so strongly conveyed and so effectively conveyed in songs that continue to move forward and progress, that you don't need necessarily a full story. These are not Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald level narratives where they give you every gritty detail. These are songs that I would describe And I kind of feel as are songs that could, to take that kind of example, these are songs that could be happening within, the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, if that makes sense. If the Edmund Fitzgerald is describing the wreck of this entire ship over the course of a couple of hours, a song like Yawning or Snarling is describing an event that happened within that greater event over the course of a few moments, and yet is still turned into an artful narrative. And it's just something that I really enjoy. It's almost, I'm perhaps not a huge fan of the kind of trendy line of, calling things micro blank, but maybe micro narrative is a good way to describe those songs. And I think that the album as a whole is one where, unlike the previous albums in this run, introduced really unique backing vocals. On a song like Grace 2, Yawning or Snarling, you have that kind of iconic look at this photograph or take a look at this photograph line, not to be confused with Nickelback, of course. But those vocals serve in stark contrast to the main vocals, and it adds a real layer of depth to this track for me, and that's a through line across the album. You have some really strong narrative tracks that do tell kind of this whole story, if you will, in something like Nautical Disaster, which also has some really neat vocal movements, which is typical of the Tragically Hip, especially in this area, and honestly just some odd word choices. But when I think about those strange vocal movements or, ending of lines or beginning of the next line, there's that, kind of right before the song really kicks in, he's off the coast of France, dear, and it almost like this cliffhanger, both sonically and narratively and vocally. And then there's that line later in the song, just like, anyway, Susan, and they're like, it's just, if you really are listening to it and thinking about it, that's just not a line you would expect to hear in a song. On a kind of to continue, Yawning or Snarling has some similar kind of movements and backing vocals, but you also have the flip side of the album with a song like The Inevitability of Death, Fire in the Hole, and An Inch an Hour, that are just like these classically rocking songs that maybe don't have quite the narrative drive to them, and also might be mixed slightly differently. When I think about, Titanic, Terrarium, Nautical Disaster, Grace 2, Yawning or Snarling, those are very vocal forward songs where the lyrical content and the vocal performance, when I listen to it, strikes me as if it were mixed as if that were the most important part of the song. It's very forward, they're very clear, crisp, within the context of the Tragically Hip, of course. But a song like Fire in the Hole, for example, is mixed in a much different way, where, kind of on the vocal mix side of things, to me it feels much more like a, not in a derogatory way, but kind of like a garage project or like a punk album, such as, an early album by The Social Distortion, where everything, including the vocals, is kind of mixed on this even plane, so it all blends together. And that helps those songs, Fire in the Hole, as an example, to really kind of strike that, like, kind of aggressive, there's a little bit of a punk element here, but it's just this rocking tune that, like, is not here to do anything other than, turn up the volume, get you going, and kind of grab your attention, and it just kind of presents as a banger, which to me is really cool. It's a nice break in the album, those moments, but I also feel like they're nice breaks that fit within the context. That mix is not so different that it is kind of jarring, which is something that I think you could fall into, where you have some of these really clean vocal forward songs, and then shifting into something like Fire in the Hole, to continue to use that example, that's mixed so much differently vocally, that could be very easy to be jarring for a listener. But in this case, I personally do not find it to be so. Same for An Inch an Hour. They fit, and they still sound like they fit within the album, which I think is really nice. I mentioned that the album is a no skip for me. I think the one maybe questionable piece of that for me is a song like Scared. That song just does not move me. It's still a great song, but within the context of this album, even within the context of that 4-album run up to here, Road Apples, Fully Completely, and Day for Night, Scared is just it's a little blasé for me. However, that song does still serve a purpose on the album as you kind of scroll through the tracks in these, as I think of them, kind of sets of 4. It is still a transitional piece into your An Inch an Hour, Emergency, Titanic, Terrarium, and Impossibilium, which are all strong songs for sure. One of the other standout tracks on the album for me, not necessarily my favorite, but one that stands out as just so starkly different from the rest, yet still fitting on the album excellently, is So Hard Done By, which is just this, it's a song that drives forward very intentionally. It's a song with a very odd tempo and cadence, and it's the most flat song of all time, perhaps. Well, not really, but it's just one that I feel is so flat in how it is sung. And it's this low, driving kind of song with this very deep, flat vocal delivery that's slightly off-tempo. It's out of key in all the right ways. And it's one of those that clearly there is a narrative there, but as the listener, you're able to take a lot of liberty as to what that narrative may be. Right? I mean, and what I guess what I mean by that is with Nautical Disaster, it's pretty plain what we're talking about or what we're singing about. With something like So Hard Done By, there is quite a few clues and context clues and characters in here, but at the end of the day, you still have some you have some ability to take liberty with what the track might truly mean or be saying. I think I hate to kind of take this from the Wikipedia page per se, but this is one of those albums that, similar to this, it fits within this run of 4, I guess I'll say, is an album that has a lot of lyrics that, they say in the critical reception portion here that, the album is stemming from the unconscious. And while I think that's an interesting way to put it, it's not entirely inaccurate in my opinion, in that there are a lot of these really strange choices in lyrical content and vocal delivery that do feel maybe not off the cuff, but they're so unique and clearly convey the character of the band and the character and the artistry and the thought process in a way that's pretty unique and leaves the album feeling very authentic, and in a way where this feels like a first draft, but it feels like a first draft by somebody who is a master in their craft. In that, sure, it could have been edited to be, better, more concise, a little bit clearer. We could have changed some of the words to be either less vague or, hit harder. But the vocabulary of the album, that feeling of being a first draft kind of adds this level of, to me, what feels like authenticity and character to the album that's very uncommon to find on, music of this style, which I think is one of the really neat parts to me, is it blends this kind of just stream of thought style of singing and writing with, some really just rockin' tunes and really interesting vocal harmonies and really cool melodies and just overall song structure. So I strongly feel that Day for Night is in the top 3 or 4 for the Tragically Hip. Certainly worth a listen, and I think it's an album that stands not only within the context of that, to me, kind of legendary run of 4, but also very well on its own and of its own merit. So certainly a must listen. Like I said, I've been listening to this really like on repeat effectively for the last month or two now, and continue to kind of hear new elements of the songs, hear new lyrics, get new ideas about what the track might be saying, and it's just a consistent, enjoyable album that really, to me, is exemplary of the Tragically Hip's discography. So certainly worth a listen, and check it out.